My name's Catherine Blakespear, and I'm the state senator representing the 38th district. So that is northern San Diego County and southern Orange County. I go to Sacramento every week, so I'm usually there Monday through Thursday and fly home on Thursday. But because I wanted to be here today with you, I flew home last night, and then we'll fly back tomorrow to Sacramento to finish our work for the week. So this is my third year in the state Senate. I come from being the mayor of the city of Encinitas for 6 years, and I care deeply about zero waste and this topic. I was just talking with my staffer, Matt, when we were driving here about how this really sparks joy and speaks to my heart, this topic. And so I'm really grateful for all the important work that you do because we need to have the advocacy, the pushing, the know-how, the brain power if we're going to actually create a circular economy and to live more sustainably with our planet. I think there's nothing that to me seems like it's more of a violation than the landfilling of so much of our single-use plastics and our single-use lifestyle that we have. And you see, of course, the problem everywhere. It's in the microplastics that get into our brain and cause dementia and Alzheimer's, the climate warming that we see that is creating so much habitat destruction and devastation for like the fires in LA. And I mean, it's across the spectrum, the problems that we see. So I'm really excited to be here today to talk a little bit about what's happening in Sacramento. So I am the chair of the Environmental Quality Committee this year, which is great. That was something that I was thrilled to be assigned to do. I was the chair of elections the year before during an election year, but to move on to being in charge of that, it was something that was really exciting to me. And yesterday I held my first informational hearing, and it was on EPR programs, so extended producer responsibility programs. And we had a number of really important speakers. And one of the things that we were focusing on is extended producer responsibility is really the future. Because if you think about products that don't have an end life or that are very hard to recycle, like hazardous waste materials, who is responsible for managing that? The public, local governments, but really those who make those products, those packaging products, all that plastic waste, or for example, the hazardous waste that is a marine flare, which is a bill that I have this year. It's like, who should be responsible for that? Ultimately, the company that produces it should be responsible for it. So having a command and control structure that says we want to reduce certain types, like styrofoam should be banned completely, and we create a way to get to a framework where we don't end up with certain products at all, but then other things are the responsibility of the manufacturer to figure out what is its end life. It needs to be recycled, reused, collected. There's an enormous amount of complexity around that issue, and it is not easy to implement because when you think about all of the things that have to line up in a supply chain, the producing of it, the collecting of it, the management of it, there's just an enormous amount of disagreement. So one of the things we see right now, SB 54 was this landmark legislation, and it only passed, this was 3 years ago, it only passed because there was a qualified ballot initiative from the public. So the public had said after many years, we do not want to have all this plastic waste, and we want there to be a different system in place. And so the legislature was under a lot of pressure to find an alternative. So what happened was there was a big group that was put together of all of these different producers and the waste haulers and everybody who's involved, basically. And they talked about every word and came up with this SB 54 framework. And so now we're right at the verge of putting out what's called the regs, the regulations. So CalRecycle has to come out with these. It's due March 8th. And there's a tremendous pressure from industry not to put the regs out, to basically go back to the drawing board and start over. And so that would mean starting over would be an entire additional year of coming up with new regs. So last week I authored a letter that was signed by a lot of my colleagues, including the author of SB 54, Ben Allen, Senator Ben Allen, and said, please come out with the regulations. This is to Cal Recycle. And so yesterday, Cal Recycle was at this hearing that I was running, and you almost never have open conflict in hearings like that. So there was really nothing that was that stood out that was discussed. But basically saying this is an iterative process. That when the regs come out, they can be changed, they can be modified, but we need to get going on this because there's no reason to delay. So I'm very hopeful that we will be moving forward. We'll see what happens. But ultimately, it does really come down to creating a lot of pressure around these really important things if we want to see the change that we want. And there's no question that the number, we've all experienced this, I think, from buying things at Costco that have enormous amounts of packaging or getting something from Amazon. And the burden is on you to figure out, is it supposed to be recycled or is it a mixed materials that can't be recycled? And basically, what is that really what we want? I think there's no question that we don't want that system. So that SB 54, extended producer responsibility, is really a focus right now in Sacramento. Another big focus, of course, is SB 1383, which is the organic waste requirements. I think those, when I was a mayor, I was so thrilled by that state law because I was unable to get an organics waste recycling off the ground in the city of Encinitas, which is a very progressive community, without the state law pushing that. So I was elected in 2014 and the requirements did not kick in for a few years. So talking to my waste hauler, talking to the city departments, talking to my colleagues, even with a lot of pressure and will, I was not able to make that happen in the city of Encinitas until that law kicked in. So you really see, I use SB 1383 as the example of why we need state laws, because they will force cities. There are more than 500 cities and counties in the state of California, and you don't want to leave it up to each individual one whether they decide to live in a more zero waste framework. So having these laws, these regulations, these requirements, cities and counties will do what they are required to do. And a lot of times, if they're not required to do it, and there's not an enormous amount of public pressure, then they just won't, because the whole system is not set up to be reactive like that. So anyway, I think of SB 1383, SB 54 are the two big bills in Sacramento that are still moving forward and generating a lot of progress, but also a lot of talk. The other thing that I'll just mention, which doesn't come up a lot in San Diego County, but is cap and trade. So cap and trade is basically a way to price and carbon. And so in the environmental community, talking about what are the types of projects that the money that's generated from pricing carbon, what projects are funded out of that? 40% of the revenue goes to transportation projects, most of it to capital, so building new transportation. You see that we have a lot of transportation that needs operational money. We don't necessarily need to have new. We need to be able to run what we have. So cap and trade needs to be reauthorized, and that will be something that we're dealing with quite a lot this year. The other thing I'll just mention, I'm not following my speaking points at all, but I care a lot about this, all these things, and I want to share them all with you. The other thing that I'll just mention is that in Sacramento, the buzzword, the word du jour is affordability. And that's a recognition that the voters, made decisions in the last election that seem to be driven by a concern over affordability. And so when we're running ideas through a lens, it's through an affordability lens at really a much higher rate than last year or the year, previous years. And I'll say in previous years, I've only been in the legislature, this is the beginning of my third year, but in my second year, and maybe my first, I felt like the lens, the metric was about accountability. So and this comes up with homelessness and a lot of different things, but this idea that money goes places and what is the result of that? So I think that accountability and affordability are both things that are really important when you're thinking about the policies that you're promoting, you're suggesting, you're fighting for, recognizing that in a political world where you need to get change, either at a local level from city councils or the county board of supervisors or your state legislature or your federal representatives in Congress, those two things I think are really in the back of everyone's mind. We want government to work better, to be more transparent and clearer about what we are doing, and we want things to be affordable because people need to be able to afford their life. So when I think about SB 54, and there'll be this plastic packaging reduction law. When industry will say, well, this is going to add to the cost, the actual reality is that when producers are responsible for the end of life, they will change the way they produce that item. So they will internalize the cost and they will make it more affordable. So actually this is promoting affordability because it's saying that we're not going to have the government putting something more on top of you. We're saying you are responsible for coming up with the solution. How are you going to reduce by 25% your plastic packaging or whatever the type of packaging is that's being used. And also SB 54 of course doesn't cover everything. It doesn't cover there are certain things that are carved out of it. But last year I had a bill that banned plastic bags. So as you may know, the voters approved, thank you, yes. I appreciate the applause for that because plastic waste doubled after the original plastic bag ban. You know, the plastic bags were those really thin ones in the grocery store, and those were banned by the voters. But what happened was those thicker plastic bags were considered reusable and recyclable, but of course nobody was reusing them or recycling them. Nowhere in California recycles them. So last year, that was my biggest bill last year, and it was very much supported by a lot of you in this room, but also by CalPERG and a lot of grassroots organization that brought some person power to that energy, to that effort. And we were able to say, when you go to the grocery store, you can bring your reusable bag or you can get a paper bag if you forget your reusable bag. But we're not going to have those thicker plastic bags anymore. And it's really alarming, you know, all the statistics, which you're probably aware of about the amount of plastic. I mean, plastic, only 9% is recycled. And the plastics industry is the fossil fuel industry. So they are transitioning to produce more and more plastic as they're producing less and less gas. And so, you know, this is something that we have to really be aware of because there is an incentive to sell and produce more plastic. One of the bills I have this year also around plastic is right now there's a requirement that there be a certain amount of recycled plastic that is put back into materials in certain circumstances. But what is recycled plastic? There's virgin plastic that's being pelletized and then sold as recycled plastic. So this should not be allowed. Obviously, we should be having recycled plastic actually be recycled so it had some use before instead of creating new plastic that then is pelletized and you can't tell the difference. So having this a chain of custody and also knowing what country the plastic comes from will allow us to be able to track what kind of plastic is actually going into this recycling. So anyway, I think I'm probably at my time, but I don't know if you want me to take questions. I'm really happy to. No? Okay. They don't want to open it up for questions. But again, thank you again for what you do. Thank you for inviting me here today to speak about this. I think that I'm a big champion for the things you care about in Sacramento and also here in San Diego County. And we're planning to do some type of environmental zero waste, some type of a summit or something in the fall. So I invite you to participate in that and we'll be reaching out with more details about it. So thank you very much for your time.